Hey everyone, my name is Blake and I'm a director of product at Instagram. I've been at Instagram for about 3 years and I've worked on a wider range of products. I've worked on products like filters way back in the day. I've worked on products like our apps, like Layouts, which is an app we use to help you make collages. Worked on apps like Boomerang, and more recently I've been spending a lot of time working on things like Stories and our home tab experience, which is what you see when you first open up Instagram, as well as things like search. And I want to talk to you today about how we use A/B testing at Instagram to build high-quality products at scale. And when you think about Instagram, we have over 800 million people that use our product every day, and that's a large number of people. And so when we think about the products that we build, we are building for a community of people that we need to speak to them at some fundamental base, some foundational need that they have. And when you do that at scale, it's something that's really important given the breadth of what we're trying to do. So at Instagram, our mission is to strengthen relationships through shared experiences. And we try to bring people together through the moments that they share. Whether those moments are photos, videos, whether they're about the best highlights of their day, that awesome birthday party they had, or an everyday moment like they're walking down the street with a friend through Stories. All of these moments are meant to help people bring them closer together. And one of the most awesome products we have on Instagram that helps people do this is Explore. It's the world's biggest social discovery platform, and the tab is all about helping people to come together through the moments that we have on the platform. And you can get to it by getting this magnifying glass at the bottom left. It's the second tab from the left there. And over the years, we spent a lot of time making Explore better. And it's now the biggest social discovery platform in the world, and has over 100 million people that use it every single day. But it didn't happen overnight. We didn't just wake up one day and have a product that people love instantly. We spent a lot of time making it better, situation by situation, case by case. And we used a lot of A/B testing to get there. So I want to talk today about how we use A/B testing at Instagram, using it to make Explore better. And we'll do that through a couple different frameworks. And one of them is focusing on problems, principles, and metrics. Problems is where we'll start first. And it's honestly one of the easiest to forget. It's most fundamental. When we think about building great products at Instagram, the first thing we do is make sure we're focusing on a problem that people have, a user problem that they experience every single day. We want to make sure we're not focusing on business problems or these other sorts of things that could distract us from actually giving value to people every single day when they open the app. And it's really easy to get distracted from that when you have a growing product at scale, people using it all over the world, and you're constantly getting bombarded by data. We see data from every different perspective. We can cut data by any dimension that we're looking at, and you can really tell yourself any single story you want. But what's important is making sure you always stay grounded on the problems. So this is like the first thing to talk about is making sure that any A/B test you do is focused on a specific problem that you're trying to solve for your community. So in the context of the Explore tab, talk about a few. One of them was kind of dating back to the beginning of the tab. So I'm not sure how many of you all remember this. Maybe show of hands. How many of you remember the popular tab? All right, I see a few hands going up. The popular tab on Instagram was where this tab all started. It was actually a 4-up grid of the most popular content on the platform. And it was just a very simple formula of the decayed number of likes for all this content. And it was really useful when the community was really small, when it was a tailored group of people in the Bay Area, maybe avid photographers, these sorts. And everyone had the same interests and had the same thoughts and cares. But as our community grew, we realized that there was a situation we had to solve here, which is the problem was relevance. People couldn't see all the same content that they wanted because they had different opinions and different thoughts. And so we had to personalize this page. So over time, we ended up choosing content that was relevant to each person that visited the tab. And so before we even thought about technologies like machine learning or AI or any of this thing, we understood why we needed that, which is everyone needs to get a tailored experiences because your interests are very different than my interests. Another example on the Explore tab is how you get to it. We all know that your waterfall is really important. And one of the most important parts of your waterfall is top of funnel. If your top of funnel isn't working well, then nothing you do downstream will even really matter. And so we had this problem here, is that no one knew what this icon was. And I don't blame them. I still don't think I know what this icon was, even years later. It's a compass, it's a star, who knows? And so we knew we had to solve this problem by looking at different iconography that might make it more intuitive and easy to understand why you even want to come to this tab. So before we even spun up any A/B test, before we looked at any different iconography, we made sure to focus on the problem, which was we wanted a piece of icon that was universally recognizable, easy to understand, and told you what this tab was about. And so we ran a bunch of different tests, And we found that the search icon here, obviously, it's one of the most intuitive examples, makes a lot of sense. It's like, okay, I'm going to look for things. And so we had a much easier top-of-funnel experience. Another one we had was from this marquee at the top. This was one of the products we had not so long ago. It was this rotating display of content at the top of Explorer, not much different than app stores you might see way back in the day. And back in the day, I mean like last year. So the problem with the marquee was that no one really knew like what it was for. You looked at this, and yeah, if you had a chance to read the text, you might think about tapping in. But it was very unclear why you should do that. And so one of the things that we really thought was important for the next phase of this evolution of the product was showing value before the tap. It was a principle and a problem we were very laser focused on. And once we defined that problem, we were able to look at the wide range of solutions that might address that problem. What are the different ways that you can actually provide value before the tap? And then we were able to do a bunch of A/B tests to figure that out. And the solution that we ultimately ended up landing on was this, an auto-playing video at the top. It's very clear what you are seeing and why you're seeing it. It's also very clear what you'll see when you'll tap on through. You'll see the rest of that video. And then when you tap on through, we can show you more videos. So it's very clear what the intent is. That also allows us to change the experience after you tap through. For example, we can have a different audio experience because you know you're about to see a video. So it's really important to stay focused on the problems you're solving before you even begin to spin up any of those tests. To that end, when you think about the problems, make sure to focus on the people that are using your product, understand the different wide range of different people that use your product, and make sure you're kind of speaking to the people that make the most sense. So the 3 things here to remember are to write down your problems at the beginning and always come back to them and use them as your North Star. It's fine if they change and evolve over time. That's to be expected. You might learn things as you're understanding the problem space better. But make sure when you change them, you understand why you're changing them, and you're changing them for the right reasons, which is you are changing them to help solve a different problem or a problem that speaks to your users. This is kind of the first thing to remember when we think about A/B testing, is what's your problem and how do you stay focused on it? Once you define the problem space, it's really important to make sure you set the guardrails up for what principles you're going to focus on for that problem space. What I mean by this is that you can quickly go astray and land in a territory that doesn't make as much sense for the solution you're trying to work on. Here's an example. So let's say you have an app that looks like this, and you have a bunch of teams working on them, and they're all trying to help people discover their products. What you might end up with is a world like this, which is a world that I don't think any of us as users want to end up in, a sea of red dots that are all calling for your attention. And it's easy to end up in this world if you don't have principles for both you and other teams that you're partnering with and working around. Each one of these tests in isolation may have made sense. Maybe people tapped on that square more or that square more. But in unification and holistically, they look really kind of distracting. And ultimately, from a metrics perspective, they probably don't perform well together as a package as they did individually. So what are the principles that we look for our A/B tests? There are a few. When we look for A/B testing, we look at 4 different things. We test for one of these 4 different reasons. It's to understand, it's to choose, it's to identify weak points, and it's to quantify impact. So we'll go through each of them. Understanding is really important, especially when you have a complex product, which a lot of us do have. Instagram is definitely complex from a wide range of things. It's an ecosystem where people are doing things for different reasons. Some people are sharing because they want to be heard. Some people are sharing because they want to get connected. And others are listening because they want to learn or they want to catch up. We don't necessarily know how all of that ecosystem plays out. So one of the things we often test for is to understand that ecosystem better. Another reason we test, and this is one of the most common reasons to test, is to choose. This situation, we know exactly what problem we're trying to solve because we've gone through that first step of the process, but we don't know exactly what arrangement of the UI may make the most sense. So here are some screenshots for where we're adding stories into Explore. On the left, we were looking at a version which was peaking the content and putting it at the top. On the right, we were peaking the content, but putting in the middle below the videos you might like feature. In the middle, we had a version that showed the typical stories experience just to mirror home and put them at the top as well. And we didn't know which of these would perform the best, so we tested them. And we found the version that made the most sense. It's hard to understand which one will make the most sense often before you understand how they perform. There was a lot of discussion and debate as to whether it was important for us to stick to the principles of showing the same circles on the Explore tab that we do in the Home tab, or whether it made more sense for us to be media first on a space that's very media-centric. Another one that we test for is to identify weak points. So on the left here, this is the old Instagram experience with the black nav bar at the top, the blue search bar over there, and over here we have the experience that we're all more accustomed to now, which is the white UI. This was a vision that we really wanted to get towards. We really wanted to make the media shine front and center. We actually, unlike the previous version, didn't have a bunch of different versions we wanted to land in. We really were very opinionated about this one. We wanted to get here because we thought this was the right thing for the long term of the Instagram product. So we weren't choosing, but instead we were identifying weak points. We were trying to figure out what would happen when we went from that to that. The key part here is your success criteria is different. In the previous version, we were looking at how metrics were performing, which one performed the best. In this, we were actually looking to make sure we didn't meaningfully hurt key metrics. You know, the metrics, meaningfully hurting key metrics can mean that you are providing less value to the people that use your product. So we weren't looking for a huge metrics win here. We were doing this because we thought it was the right way to align our product for the future. And so when we saw everything was about fine, then we were able to launch it and move forward. So understanding why you're testing something will help you to define your success criteria for testing and make it easier to ship it so you don't have a bunch of discussion and debate with your team after the fact. It's much easier to do beforehand. And the last reason we test is to quantify impact. And so there's a lot of situations at Instagram where we align given teams with specific metrics. And having those metrics helps them understand what problems they're solving, how to move fast, and change things in product for the better. For example, in Explore, we have a holdout group that over the given half, we understand when we change the content from this to this, was it impactful? What sort of ranking changes can we make that make the product better, that show you better content, that give you a better experience in Explore? And by quantifying the impact over time, we're able to calibrate the team's understanding where the most leverage is. So that's another reason we test. But there's a couple reasons to be aware of testing, things you need to look out for, things you need to watch out for and have concerns around. And these are those: loss of control, confusion, and code complexity. These are some of the biggest ones we think about on Instagram. One of the most interesting metaphors I think about for loss of complexity. Imagine you came home, and this is what your living room looked like before you left for the day. And then you come home, and your living room looks like this. Your chair's in a different spot. Your couch is maybe moved out. There's a piano there. You're not sure if you like piano. And then someone walks in the door, and they says, "Don't worry, this is better. You should like this. This is going to mean that you're going to enjoy this room more often." You're not going to feel pretty good about that. In fact, you're going to feel pretty bad. And to a lesser degree, this is how many of our users can feel when we change the products that they use and the products that they love. They open up the product that they use every single day, and all of a sudden, things are in different places, and they do different things, and it's very jarring for them. They feel a loss of agency and a loss of control over the product that they know and love. They weren't given a warning about what's happening. They weren't told why things are changing, and they don't even know it's for the better. So make sure to keep in mind loss of control that people will have when you test. Another one that we think about is confusion. With 800 million people using our product, we have a lot of situations where people are talking about our product over the dinner table or with their friends out at a bar, you name it. And one of the things we want to make sure we do is make sure that everyone has as unified experience as possible, so that when you're talking to your friends, they don't have a different experience than you. That can create a lot of confusion. This can even be true for products that have many fewer users, enterprise products, you name it. Customers talk to each other, they cross across departments, and it's really important that you unify things as quickly as possible to avoid confusion. The last one is code complexity. So over time, all these tests can kind of add up, and they can slow teams down and take it longer to iterate and land on the better product. So it's an important one that we think a lot about. How can we make sure that we're not adding a bunch of code complexity to the app to make sure it's fast and performant? So we do this by kind of making sure our testing frameworks for the things we test most frequently are very efficient, allow us to test very quickly. And then we take old tests that we haven't been successful, wind them down as quickly as possible, and make sure to remove the old code. It's much harder and less exciting to remove old code that you know doesn't work than it is to add new code that you're not sure will work. And so we need to make sure to keep attention here. So the TLDR of the principles is to remember the human side of every test. Don't just think about what's going on in your office or your space. Think about how the product you're building is going to impact every single person, and know that they're going to react in a different way, and be empathetic to the change that it's creating. Last but not least is metrics. I'm sure we all have a lot of horror stories about metrics. Lost a lot of sleep about metrics, had exciting days because of metrics. They're a topic of a lot of conversation because they're very powerful. The right metric can really focus a team in the right way and get them on the rails in an exciting direction, and the wrong metric can tend to steer things the other way. When we think about metrics, the reason it's the last part here is because that's how we think about them. We focus on the problems first, we articulate those well, we set the guidelines through our principles, and then we make sure to define a metric that helps to ensure the success of what problem we're trying to solve. And so it's really important that you think about how the metric you're choosing sets up the incentive structure for you, the team around you, and everyone else. So when we think about the metrics that we care about, we think about defining metrics that are quick, close, and simple. A quick metric allows you to learn very, very fast. The quicker the metric, the better. It means you get data points every single day. It doesn't mean you need to make a decision that day, but if you're waiting a long time to get any amount of input on whether your test is working or not working, then you're not going to be able to learn very quickly, and that's a bad place to be. So make sure your metric is quick and can give you insight very quickly. Of course, also means there's a ton of infrastructure to build to make sure you get the data quickly. It's a combination of the metric as well as the infrastructure to get you that data as quick as possible. The other one is close. There's a lot of top-line company metrics that we all probably think about. A lot of times they boil down to how much money the company's making, or how many people use the product, or what retention is. You can kind of name these big top-line metrics for any given product. But when you're working on a specific product like Explore, you want to make sure the metric you're working on is as close as possible to the day-to-day execution of the work that you and your team will be doing. And lastly, you want to make sure the metric's simple. Metrics aren't meant to be perfect. They're just meant to give you a general direction of how your product is trending. And then you need to combine that with the problems you're solving and the principles you have to make the right product decisions. So making sure your metric is simple and doesn't try to encapsulate everything through something like weighting or otherwise is important. Because you might end up spending your time actually trying to understand why the metric's going in a certain direction more than you're actually spending it building the product, which is counter to what you're trying to do. You're trying to make the product better. So you want to keep your metrics simple. So for Explore, how do we take these principles of quick, close, and simple and find a metric that makes sense for this tab? One of the first places you might look is monthly actives, right? I mean, that's a pretty important metric. How many people use this tab every single month? The problem with this metric is it's very slow. You don't get a sense of how quickly the tests that you have are working because it takes a long time for you to understand how many monthly actives you have, even if you do some sort of trailing average. So it fails the test for quick. You might look at that and say, well, what if we did daily actives instead? It's a lot quicker. The problem here is it fails our test for close. A lot of products that we build can have the daily active metric, and it's not close enough to the day-to-day product work that you and the team would be doing on a tab like this. So you might head over to something like impressions. This one actually makes a lot of sense at first. Like impression, like when we show you a photo, when we show you a video, it's quick, it's very close to the work you're doing, it's opinionated. The challenge, of course, is what is an impression? Does it mean you tap on a photo? Does it mean you tap on a story? Does it mean you tap on a lot? There are all these different ways we can count impressions. Does that mean that 5 views of a story is better than 1 view of a photo in the grid? What if you just scroll through the grid without ever viewing something in the grid by tapping it? Is that an impression? So you can quickly get into this situation where it's hard to define what the metric is, and that's tough as well, because you want to keep the metric really simple and straightforward. So this fails our test for simple. The metric that we use for this team in this space is time spent, the amount of time that people spend in the tab every single day. It's very quick. You can measure time over any duration you want. It can be a second, it could be 5 minutes. You can pick the amount of time that you'd like to measure, and you can understand how your product is changing very rapidly. Really, at that point, it just depends on your infrastructure and how fast you can get the data to someone that can understand and interpret it. It's very close. Not every product should be gauged by the amount of time you spend on the product. Sometimes you want to make products that are very, very quick and very, very efficient. You want to get in, get out, get the thing done. That's not what we're trying to do with this space. With this space, we're trying to show you great content that you're excited about and that helps you explore all the awesome people and accounts that are on Instagram. So time spent makes sense for this surface in a way that other metrics won't. And lastly, it's very simple. So that impressions problem we talked about doesn't exist here. You can measure time whether you're scrolling through the grid. You can measure time whether you're tapping onto a photo. You can measure time whether you're watching a live stream. And each one of those can be unified into a single metric that we can track and change over time. If we add new surfaces or new types of formats to this tab, we don't need to change the metric, which can be pretty disruptive. So it passes all our tests. And that's the metric that we've decided to use. So at Instagram, when we think about using A/B testing to help build high-quality products at scale, we think about the problems that we're focused on, and we anchor there first. We make sure that we're focused on user problems that they have every single day, and we don't get distracted with other things. We need to make sure that we're solving something that will make the product better for someone or some set of people. We're specific about what set of people we care about, and we're strategic about why we care about those people and not others. We're very principled in our approach. We talked about how We test for one of four very clear reasons. We test to understand something. We test to choose, is it this one, or that one? We test to define weak points. And we test to quantify impact. And defining why you're testing something before you actually start to test something will mean that you'll be able to iterate much faster after the results start to come in. And lastly, we make sure that our metric is quick, close, and simple so that we can make sure to make informed decisions and people can be focused in the right way. And that's the extent of the prepared content I have for everyone here. And I'm happy to answer any sort of questions that people might have.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
That was great. Okay, so now we're going to take Q&A. How do you identify which features are problems?
Sure. So when you have when you have your problems your problems are nested. So when you think about the problems we have with the Explore tab, for example, the ultimate problem we have is to help people to discover and connect with all the great moments on the platform. So when you have that problem at the top line and it's clear, you can begin to start to break down the problems from there. So, for example, we talked about the entry point. So that problem was identified through user research and understanding why people couldn't get into the tab. It was identified based off one of our goals, too, which was what is the participation rate of this tab? How many people come to this space? And by looking at kind of the top-line problem and mapping out through user research and kind of other angles, we can begin to identify other problems that make sense down the tree.
Could you discuss how the product org is structured at Instagram? How many product teams and what is the scope of each team?
Sure. Organizational design is actually a really exciting topic because it really helps kind of structure how work is going to get done at a company, and certainly as you scale, it's really important. So at Instagram, we have our mission, which we're very careful about and make sure we understand very closely, which is to strengthen relationships through shared experiences, where a relationship can be you to your best friend, you to your partner, you to your colleague, and experience could be you watching a live stream or you seeing the photo and feed. And to accomplish that mission, we want to make sure we organize people in groups that advance in some dimension. So we actually have 4 product organizations at Instagram that each advance it in different ways. The first part of actually learning about Instagram is actually, as a user, finding it and knowing about it, knowing it's a thing in the world that exists, this thing called Instagram, and this thing called Instagram is something that I want to use. That actually is a lot of work to get someone from point A to point B there. So we have an entire organization called Growth and Protect and Care that makes sure that around the world people are understanding Instagram, they're downloading it, and they're registering for it and making it easy to find. And they also make sure they're protected when they're there. That's where the Protect and Care comes in. That's spam, bullying, these sorts of things. And so that organization focuses on monthly active people, how many people in the world use our products. But once they're there, it's really important that we help them share and express themselves. And that's where the Creation and Communication organization comes in. The Creation and Communication organization helps people to share the moments that matter to them most. Think creative tools, think things like Direct, these ways that you help to create the moment that you want to share. And they measure their success using how much media is created in the world. Having someone share something to the world means that we've done a good job giving them an outlet for something they're trying to express. A lot of the work that we talked about today was done by the Engagement Org, which is the team that helps people to connect and discover with all those great moments once they're there. And the interesting thing about some of those metrics is that we can measure the time across the app more broadly. If people are spending more time in the app, we're doing a good job making the app useful for them. And last but not least, we of course have our business platform team, which is a team that thinks a lot about how advertisers can be key constituents of our community and measures their success through revenue.
Awesome. How does the product team and UX team work together? Do these roles ever collide in terms of decisions?
Yeah, so each one of those organizations we talked about actually has a series of product teams kind of in it. You know, when you're working at the scale that Instagram is, it's important that you kind of begin to form pods, if you will, of different people. So each one of those pods or those teams or those squads, there's a number of different names you can put to them, has a number of people in them. There's a product leader, there's a design leader, there's engineering teams, there's data scientists, and there's researchers. And there's also a number of other supporting people that kind of roam between pods. You might have someone that helps with product marketing. You might have someone that helps with content strategy, what the copy in the app says or doesn't say, and a wealth of other teams. So from that core group of people, what we do is help each team kind of get on the rails in a certain way through metrics and these sorts of things, specific problems, And ultimately, kind of the relationships beyond that are up to the teams to kind of figure out. And often what we do is build teams that kind of partner well with each other, product and design leaders that kind of have a nice symbiosis together. It's possible that sometimes they do overlap in terms of perspectives, and one person might say we should go this way and another might go that way. There are ways to mediate that and kind of talk through things like in product reviews. A lot of times it comes down to fundamentally understanding the assumptions that each person is making. What are the assumptions that you are making when you think that path A is the right path? And what are the assumptions that I'm making when I think path B is the right path? Some frameworks that we use there are things like what would have to be true. So you can actually list out what would have to be true for me to believe that A is the right way to go. What would have to be true that B is the right way for me to go. And if you actually break down each of those points, you can see where we start to disagree. And hopefully that disagreement can either be kind of mapped out in data or some other way.
And how many A/B tests do you run at a time?
Too many to count. The thing about it, as we continue to scale, there are more and more A/B tests that we're running from different sorts of angles, from helping people to discover the product to helping them use the feed. And it's not so much about quantity that we care about right now. It's about the intent behind each test and the empathy we have for every test that happens. So if you look at some of those tests, we are very, very careful not to make navigation changes. I bet you a lot of you haven't seen a navigation change in the app since we changed it to that white bar. And that's intentional, because every navigation change we make is very expensive for everyone that uses our product. It's jarring, it's unfair to them. On the other hand, we make changes to ranking all the time. On the Explore tab, we show you different content every single day. And that's less jarring to people because it's less discoverable. So it's less about the number of tests that we have and more about what those tests are and what the benefit and cost of them are.
How do you decide what solution is worth testing? How do you determine what to build before you actually test?
You can never really know, sometimes a test will surprise you. And so the interesting place to walk here is trying to shut ideas down too early. I don't think there's any perfect science here. We certainly do use, the knowledge we've built up over the years as kind of related data points. Well, we tested this over here, and it had this outcome, which means that this is directionally here in this space. And I think after you have some amount of experience working in a given area, you kind of begin to, I'm sure many of us that have worked in a product for a given period of time have some sort of intuition that we build up about, when we make this product change, this is likely the range of the metrics impact that'll happen. And you'll never be perfect, and sometimes you'll be surprised, and so it's really important to make sure that, if you are in the margin, to kind of make sure to give it a go.
How does product work with engineering? How technical are Instagram's PMs?
So Instagram is a very kind of engineering first culture. One of the quickest ways to fail as a new Instagram PM coming into Instagram is to kind of think of yourself as the mini CEO that's going to dictate, we're doing this, we're doing this, we're doing this, get in line. Very quickly, you'll find that it will not work. The product culture at Instagram is one of helping everyone around you to kind of lead by motivation and lead by kind of influence, and helping people to understand why the path that you're thinking is the most productive path. Help them understand the thought process that you arrived at to get there. Give them the necessary context to get to the same place that you are. That's one of the biggest ways that we kind of collaborate with not just engineering, but all the other functions as well as product leaders.
How do you respond to concerns that recent Instagram features are lifted directly from Snapchat?
It's a fun one. So here's what I'd say. When we think about building products for our community, we think about, again, what problems they're solving. And I think Snapchat deserves a lot of credit towards pioneering a new format here with the Stories feature, which I think is probably one of the kind of implications of this question. When we think about that format, when we think about really kind of compartmentalizing it down, they deserve a lot of credit for being one of the first to do it. On the same hand, when you think about what the format is, it's a series of photos and videos stitched together on a full screen device. And when we think about that format in its compartments, we think about it as being one of the great tools to help people to understand what's happening around the world, to help people share the moments that matter to them. And ultimately, what we care about most is helping to solve the problems for our community. And when other people, whether it's Snapchat or any other competitor for that matter, have ideas or thoughts that advance the craft of what we're trying to do, as a social apps, we think it's important to help make sure the people that in our community have those tools as well. So that's kind of how we think about it. We do think about what we're building with Instagram is to kind of tie that all together in a unique way and make sure what we're always doing is bringing it back to our mission, which we say a lot around the office, and so I'm sorry for saying it so many times here. But we try to root in our mission, and we focus on that, and we focus on the user problems, and that's where we keep our head at the most times to make sure that we are all doing things that kind of fall in line together.
That was awesome. Thank you, Blake.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thanks so much. That was really good.